So you speak Swahili?
Yes.
Fluently?
Fluently.
What other languages do you speak?
Spanish fluently, because then we went to Galápagos, so there was 15 years in South America, so I speak Spanish fluently.
So that's the third. So English, Swahili,
Spanish,
French.
Yes.
Any more? Is that
German?
enough?
I studied, so up until A level. So
4 fluent,
and a little bit of Turkish, but
just throwing Turkish as well.
Hello, my name's Pippa Heylings, and I'm the Member of Parliament for South Cambridgeshire.
Okay, right, Pippa, to start off with, give us a timeline of how you got from growing up to here. Just a brief overview so we can soak it in.
It's what they call these squiggly careers. So I'm not where I thought I would be. So from education, I thought I might go into journalism. And went and did an English and arts degree with modern languages because I love modern languages. During that time, I decided what I wanted to be able to do is actually work internationally in international development issues, poverty alleviation, things like that. And so I then went into volunteering and went out as a teacher. So I got my teaching qualification. I taught for 3 years. I was head of department. And then I went out to East Africa and didn't come back and moved into a completely different area of work whilst out there. And that was just eye-opening, changed what I was going to do in life, what I was working on, what I was interested in, skills I've developed. But it was turned out to be working a lot on environmental issues and people's and communities' rights. So I went from being a teacher trainer into working on community and villagers' rights out in Africa. That then went to South America, to the Galápagos Islands, and I was working on lots of legislation support to policymakers, to decision makers, and how people can get decision makers to make the right policy. So when coming back to the UK, and I was still working on those kind of things, and conflict management, so I do a lot of mediation, and then stood locally.
And then it just rumbled on, didn't it? Now you're here.
And now I'm here.
There's a lot to unpack in that. First off, do you live on the Galápagos Islands?
So I lived for 6 years in the Galápagos Islands.
Oh my goodness. And for context, for people who don't know, it's very hard to actually go and visit the Galápagos Islands because they regulate it quite heavily. So to live there must have been incredible. Very
few people have that chance and that opportunity. And I went out there because it was my husband's, I always call it that, it's his second wife, really. He worked there as a tour guide way back in the early 80s. And he'd always dreamed of going back and working there for conservation because they're so special. So the islands, as you say, this amazing archipelago, which developed without humans.
Yeah.
So incredible. You've just got all of this wildlife that has no understanding of fear, of humans or even predators and animals. So it's this most incredible place. And we went there because he was director of the Charles Darwin Research Station.
You grew up in Hull?
Yes.
And you grew up, Dad was a doctor,
yep.
GP, and Mum was a nurse.
Yep.
So medicine and the medical space is very much part of your world. And you've spoken about supporting your dad going on his rounds as a GP.
Yeah. So that was a time when GPs were doing, incredible amounts of work as a family GP. So you'd have that sort of the family GP. We'd go out onto the streets and on the roads in Hull. And if we're just out in town with Dad, families would stop and it would be the grandma, the mum and the kids. And Dad would have been present at the birth of all of them. So that was the real family GP. And so he was really well known. And I was fascinated by his work. And he would take us out. So he would do a surgery in the morning and then you'd have the visits, the home visits. So he would take us on the home visits to carry his bag in his medical bag. And just that sense of seeing him give that time and that care to people. But also what the big thing to me was just seeing how resilient people were when there was some bad news. If there was bad news about somebody they loved and what was happening to them in terms of illness, how much they respected the GP, how much they really took on, what the GP was saying, but how that could be life-changing, even just that home visit. So to me, it was that's care in the community, and that's affected me all the way, I think, through my career, that how you really understand that dignity and resilience of everybody, no matter what their situation, but people are living with some really, behind closed doors, some really difficult situations.
Is there a particular, that must have been such a, in those formative years, a lot of must stick with you from that. Are there particular moments or particular individual that really did stick in your mind, or a particular moment which has sort of stayed with you?
Yeah, I think one was we were going and we'd been called out, and it was a weekend, so doctors were doing weekend visits as well at that time. So we were called out, and I think it was a Sunday, and we went, and the couple were there, and they were an elderly couple, and they said, "Oh, he's fine, Doc. Really, we didn't really want to call you out." That was always the thing. We didn't really want to call you out. We didn't want to bother anybody, and my dad did an examination of the gentleman, and he said, he really is going to need to go into hospital. And if he doesn't go into hospital, then he's not really going to be able to survive. He's got got a terrible situation with his heart. And they said, "Oh well, then that's fine. We'll do that. But I've just cooked this lunch." And Dad said, "Well, I think he needs to go in quite quickly, and so we'll call the ambulance." So they come in, and then the lady just turned in and said, "Well, will you take the joint?" So somebody gets to eat the Sunday joint, and it's just that whole, always think about somebody else, terrifying situation for them, but just that warmth, that resilience, that stuck with me.
And then school, how was school for you? An easy childhood, was it?
I think sort of easy in that, probably quite privileged that we were growing up, sort of in a GP's family. Growing up, it was with 3 brothers.
You the youngest or oldest? Or?
I'm second, so I've got elder brother and then 2 brothers below me. And in the whole area that we were, it was just boys. And there was a lot of sort of Irish Catholic families and different families. So the neighbourhood was majority male. And so my childhood was very much a tomboy childhood. I played a lot of football, but football where I was just another one of the lads. And that was a big thing to me as well, was access to things like, football and the sport. It was all boys' world. It was all a man's world. And so the way that I did that was to be a tomboy and be part of that. And sometimes I was indistinguishable, and that was easiest because then, I just played, and then people thought you were a boy and you're just playing until you recognised for your sort of skills or talent or how much you gave to the game. But it's just brilliant seeing nowadays that there's girls' football. I'm passionate about this as well.
Was there any point where, or an age or whatever, where it diverged and you became increasingly aware that you were a young woman in a very male-dominated area, or did that carry through all the way until you left for university?
No, so I then went to a girls' school, and I found that really hard. Really didn't like girls initially. And
what about? What was the?
I think I was just unused to it, so I wasn't. So coming from Hull, and so we've got Yorkshire, and there's a lot of Yorkshire humour and very down to earth, very direct. And so I was just more in the rough and tumble and direct, I felt. So it took me a lot to get to understand just being around girls, and that was good, because in the end I found that some of my deepest friendships now are with girls and women. So it's just wonderful. It was growing up. It was a competitive time. There were always more chances for boys, I felt, and so you were always competing in that way and showing that you could do it as well and better. That's just what I felt all the way through. Yeah, and the girls' school was fun. I became head girl in that, and so in the end, I loved the environment, and
So so you just mentioned there growing up. Did you feel that at times you were having to climb a steeper mountain than? I'm going to continue with this metaphor. Steeper mountain than your male sort of peers.
Yes, and I think that's continued. It's not knocked me back, but it's definitely there, and something that I think I and many women are aware of.
So off from this girls' school, from the sounds of it, head girl, straight A student, not a detention to your name from the sounds of it.
And what I did do is I remember in sewing, like the domestic kind of lessons, I would sneak out of the window and climb the tree. And
hang out in the tree.
And hang out in the tree, like climbing trees better than sewing. So I did sort of, managed to sneak out and managed to not be seen sneaking out and keep out of those sessions.
And no one sort of then, is that someone in the tree out there or something? And so you, from your ascendancy to head girl, you then go to university.
Yeah.
But your university is different from many other UK students in that you went abroad to, is it Rhodes University?
No, so I was in Nottingham. So I went to Nottingham University and I studied, I did my degree there, and then I stayed and did my PGCE. As a teacher's qualification at Nottingham as well. And then I taught and was head of department in Derby in a village.
Teaching what?
So I was teaching English and drama.
English and drama.
So theatre is a big passion of mine as well.
How did you find being a teacher?
I loved it.
Yeah.
I resisted becoming a teacher because everyone had always said to me, you'll be a teacher. I said, no, I won't be a teacher.
Why did they say that?
Well, because I always used to get everyone around and do teaching things when I was little, or I would always be organising people, or, I'd have all the brothers and all these boys, I'd have them all lined up either to do a piece of theatre or to pretend in a classroom situation or something like that. So people said, oh, you'll be a teacher. But as I grew up, I was like, no, I don't. That's not what I want to do. But in the end, I had applied after university to do volunteering abroad internationally because it's what I knew I wanted to do. And they said, what's your skill? So you're going to get loads, so much. It will enrich your life going out to other countries. But what will they get from you? What are your skills?
Yeah.
What are you bringing? You haven't got a trade or a skill. And that's when I looked around and I said, well, I will do my PGCE, I'll do my teach. And then I went and did 3 years. Loved it, became head of department, absolutely loved it.
In 3 years, that's quite a sharp from a PGCE start to 3 years being head of department. That's quite a quick trajectory, is it?
Yeah, I suppose so. There was somebody left, and it was the head of drama and English, and they brought me in, and I knew that was going to be that opening. So it was this possibility of moving into that. And it was in a village college, and I love village colleges, which means that they're the heart of the community. So, everybody comes into the schools, and so we did a lot around that work as well.
It was a secondary school, was it?
Yeah.
Teaching all the way up to 18, was it?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It was in Derby, it was in sort of second, third generation, a lot of Asian families. So it was also about a lot of girls, again, who were in second generation Asian families where, yes, they were allowed to go to secondary school, but not necessarily an option to go to university for some families. And so working with them and with their families where they had equal rights up to the age of 16 maybe, but not after 16. And there was cultural issues and differences there, but also working with those young girls about thinking what their futures are and what their future opportunities in life's,
How did you
chances.
How did you deal with that? How did you manage that? How did you deal with that? Because that might, from everything you've said about your own how you were brought up and you climbed that steeper hill and you got to where you got, to see other young girls seeing what it sounds like quite a hard ceiling on what they could do up to certain ages. That must have been quite frustrating.
Well, I think that's why I love sort of the whole concept of village colleges and community colleges, because it's very, very much about working within that community. So there was a lot of work with the different families within the community, with the cultures, with the groups. So we were able to talk a lot with families about their girls, about the futures, about the brothers and the daughters. And you're not going to change anything within a generation, but we were able to talk about some of those situations, those contexts, provide a safe space for some of those girls as well. And it wasn't possible for all of them to change what was happening within their family. But this is about lifetime. This is about them finding their place within their family and culture within the UK, and all the opportunities that provides as well. So it wasn't so much as frustrating. It was feeling for them and being able to accompany them on what's quite I was facing different cultural challenges, as I was growing up, and they were facing different ones too. But it was by working both with their families, their parents, with their brothers, uncles as well, who also had grown up, and so there's a difference there, and also with family workers who are working in the community.
Despite you clearly having that awareness of the momentum over the long term, you were still talking to individuals who are in the now, and that change will not come in time for them.
And I think that's why I got involved with that much more, which was feeling very much for some of the students that you come to know. And so for me, it was a learning journey, because your immediate knee-jerk reaction is wanting to be completely on their side for them to have equal access to what you culturally would be wanting. So you're projecting a lot in terms of, what you would want and what you think they should be able to have. And so that's why I really sought out a lot of advice, met with a lot of parents to understand the context a lot more. And because the initial symptoms you feel with people, young girls saying, well, it's almost like I'm schizophrenic. So I'm here at school and there are all of these opportunities. My work means that I would get straight A's, I would go straight on, I could have this lifestyle. But here, my family is perhaps saying I can't do that. So that's hugely, can be distressing. It wasn't sort of frustrating. It was how do you help somebody within that journey? And that's why I loved working within Derby, because there were many people, rather than sort of trying to take that on yourself. It was really about how to help them navigate that and how change could come. And I'm still very good friends with two of those girls.
Are you?
One did go to university straight away and one went to university later on.
Fantastic. So you feel you made a difference?
I feel they made a difference. I learned a huge amount from that.
Why did you decide to leave teaching then? You did it for how long? So
I didn't leave teaching. So I did my the teaching here in England for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I went back to VSO, which is the voluntary service overseas.
And why did that happen?
Because it was always there. The itch was always there. I'd done my PGC and training in teaching. And then I thought, well, you can't just have a qualification. You have to go out and do the teaching. I went out to do the teaching and fell in love with it. But there was still something which was, I know that what drives me is wanting to know about the bigger picture, I want to be able to understand why things are different in different countries and how we can help as well. And so it was that drive for public service, I think community service even more. I wanted to sort of,
After teaching, or when you were deciding to make this transition into the overseas work, did you have a particular place in mind or area in mind you wanted to go and work? Where was that?
So I love mountain climbing. I love walking and romantic. So I was doing climbing. So I was part of the mountain rescue out in near Nottingham in Sheffield and around that area. So I love that. So weekends we're out doing the climbing and walking and mountain rescue stuff. So the one place that you could go where nobody else could get in unless they were a volunteer was Bhutan at that time, which is a tiny, tiny mountainous kingdom where it was closed to tourism, closed to anybody being able to go in unless you went in as a volunteer to support them in their education program. And so this for me was one, I could, both near Nepal, so I mean the incredible mountains. But the other thing is you could be part of what was a very ambitious education program within Bhutan for their population, which you wouldn't get access to that in any other way except going in as a volunteer. So that was my place. In the end, they changed from secondary school to primary school. So there was my huge disappointment was they came back and said, you can't go anymore because they've decided that they will focus on primary education. And I was a secondary school teacher. So then I looked, and where that came up then was I was offered Indonesia or Zanzibar as a teacher trainer because I had a lot of experience then, relatively. So I chose the island of Zanzibar off the east coast of Africa.
How many years were you a teacher trainer then overseas?
So in the end, I stayed 8 years in the islands of Zanzibar. So I was in the northern island of Pemba, which is very rural. And I was a volunteer. I extended my volunteer, so it's first 2 years, so I extended it again.
And again and again and again if you stay
So I extended it to the second term. But during that time, I was then working, I set up environment clubs with all the schools and the kids in the schools and started working with the local fishermen because it was about sort of how you could get more protein into the diet because I could see that a lot of kids had anemia. So they were falling asleep in lessons and they weren't well. So it was about how do you get a better diet? Started working with the fishermen around sort of what they were doing with fishing issues. And I was approached for a job within the Zanzibari government, which was about how do you get young people and communities active around their new environment policy. And I worked then there for the next 5 years.
So that was your first taste really then of governmental work, governmental service, public service in that sense.
Yeah, and that was in Swahili.
When it wasn't for the UK.
All in Swahili.
So you speak Swahili?
Yes.
Fluently?
Fluently.
What other languages do you speak?
Spanish fluently, because then we went to Galápagos, so there was 15 years in South America, so I speak Spanish fluently.
So that's the third. So English, Swahili,
Spanish,
French.
Yes.
Any more? Is that
German?
enough?
I studied, so up until A level. So
4 fluent,
and a little bit of Turkish, but
just throwing Turkish as well. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think I'm nosy. I can't be a place and not know what everyone's saying.
When you were overseas, what were the biggest stresses for you during that time? Aside from the massive rewards you were getting as well.
One of I had huge learning, which is the volunteer, the sense of wanting to do good or have an impact, and the complexity of what real people's lives are in different contexts and cultures. So, what you can do, and then, learning. For example, I was working with local fishermen about how they would manage their coral reefs, and that's where they got their fish from. And so we got an agreement between them all that, and this came from them, that if they left it for a period, if they didn't fish for a period, and they all agreed that they didn't fish on the coral reefs for a period of 5-6 months, and nobody did, then the fish would bounce back. And at that point, there was very little fish available because they'd overfished. And they agreed it, they got the plan working, and it was starting to work. But then what happened was the dynamite fishers came in from other villages outside, and dynamite throwing that on a coral reef, which means you've got no chance for the eggs and the small fish and the juveniles and whatever. You're destroying the whole ecosystem. And so the fishermen went out and said, we've got a management plan. We've got our plan. We've agreed this amongst us, 7 villages of us. And they went out and they brought these other fishermen to land, and they said, this is our management plan. You need to obey this. And they didn't. They went away. They came back and did the same. So the fishermen went out and they brought the boats back and the nets back. And they burnt the boats and they cut the nets. And they said, this is to show you that this is real. You don't fish. We've got a management plan for our area. Well, what happened then was those fishermen had influence in government. They went to the police. The only law that was available was damage of private property. There was no law about fishing and fishing rights for communities to manage their own resources. And the fishermen that I had been working with were put in jail.
So these were the fishermen who had taken action themselves against these dynamite fishermen who were destroying the management plan.
They'd waited 6 months. They'd managed to actually manage the coral reef, so there was a surplus of fish available for everybody, so that they were able to have a better diet, have better income and livelihoods. And these others were coming in to basically, just as everybody, fish anywhere because it's open. What I saw then was intention isn't enough. That's why laws, policy is so important. If you don't have something to protect and say your action plan matters in law, you can defend it in a court and defend the right to be able to manage your own resources. That's what took me on a path of moving into environmental work.
Did you ever get any pushback for the fact of, who are you to come here and tell me what to do in this area? Or along those lines, if that makes sense.
I think because, one, this is the whole thing sort of about many of the sort of challenges, I think, that you learn about this. So in a way, in a colonial sense or a post-colonial sense, if you're coming in, and I was an honorary male in that society, which was mainly Muslim in the African island sense. And because I was coming in as part of British support to the islands and in a role which was important, which is teaching, which is very revered, I was treated as a sort of a higher level as an honorary male. So
were you told explicitly you are an honorary male? Or
when I asked people about when I was able to then talk to people and sort of say, why aren't there other women in this room when we're making certain decisions? Or, maybe I should go and join the women who were in a different part of the house while we were talking, having coffee with the men of the house and things like that. Then it was like, but you're our guest. And, and the guest therefore was basically an honorary male within that setting. Not that, what was great was when I did, the women were having far more fun. And they weren't downcast, they were having lots of fun. It was just that it was given that. So one thing you had to recognise is not to take that for granted in any way, or to feel entitled in any way about that. And because I lived in the village with the villagers, then I could see what their lives were like, and it was me who was the guest. So there was no sense that I was telling anybody what to do. What I felt was my role, and it's been a lot, which is about how do we get people to have a conversation about this? How do we get the right information? Who could tell us a little bit more about what the options are? And enabling that conversation to happen rather than telling anybody. So that was why the power of those people going out to defend their area was they'd made that decision on their own terms, in their own cultural terms.
And did you just have to step back when it ended up, when those fishermen ended up in...
And that was very worrying. So I had no control. And I thought, well, in some ways you thought, well, you're almost like, this is people finally feeling they can stand up for their own livelihoods and futures. It felt a little bit like that. I wasn't making those decisions. But when I visited them in jail, that was one of the most difficult moments in my life, because being in jail, horrible conditions in jail, but they weren't able to bring any food or money into their families during that time. And these are areas that have so little anyway. And their distress at that, and their family's distress at that. That was when I said, you don't play with these things. You've got to know what people's rights are and find ways to enable them to have greater rights so that they can actually do this in a safe way.
From your work with the government, you then go on to be a mediator. Is that right? For companies.
So when doing that work in Zanzibar, that's where, when you mentioned the South Africa, so I decided to do my master's in environmental education. So I'd moved into then environmental education, and I wanted to learn a lot more about it. And I did that master's from South Africa whilst I was based in East Africa. So my focus at that point was about how you empower, how you facilitate, enable conversations and agreements. When we went to the Galápagos Islands, following Zanzibar, we went out to South America and to the Galápagos Islands, immediately saw that there were issues around the marine. So I've been working with fishermen, so around the marine management in Galápagos. But this was different style. So I've been working with people who are, this was about their livelihoods, this was about poverty, this was about malnutrition and making sure you've got enough natural resources. In Galápagos, it's about some of the most, unique, precious nature, but at the same time, very powerful tourism, because it's huge tourism interest, and industrial fishing that was happening right up to, the coastal edge. So I then did training in conflict management and became trained as a mediator.
What was your hardest mediation that you've done? How long were you a mediator for? Where's your career expanded from?
Well, basically, it was mediating to help create the Galápagos Marine Reserve.
So it's exclusively in the Galápagos Islands?
Yeah. So initially, and then I worked in it since then. So it was basically got the training while I was in the Galápagos Islands, because we were looking at the conflicts around, what was happening in the seas around Galápagos.
Because I remember there was, it did get quite nasty with was it sea lions that were getting sort of killed and as protests by fishermen who were upset about what was happening in terms of regulation over fish. So it got quite difficult.
There'd been shootings of park guards by fishermen who were coming in for one of the sea cucumber fishing trade, which was really lucrative in Asia. So that was a big illegal fishing that was happening at that time. So there'd been shootings of park guards, and the fishermen had taken over the Galápagos Research Station, and they were holding sort of the giant tortoises, which are sort of very, very iconic for the Galápagos, burning tyres in the roads, holding the staff hostage and holding, threatening the tortoises. So it made newspaper headlines nationally and internationally across the world. The US had sort of put in a notice that it was unsafe to go to Galapagos. The UK also sort of had trouble.
What year was this?
So this was in 90. So this was 96.
96. And you were there. So how long were you there in total?
So we were. Well, so it was 7 years in Galapagos, just 7 years.
Yeah.
And during that time, we were able to get from that situation of conflict to a consensus that led to the creation of the Galápagos Marine Reserve. So that was huge. And that meant that industrial fishing couldn't come, within a huge boundary of the Galápagos Marine Reserve, which was really important.
Do you think that's one of your biggest achievements to date?
Yeah, that was
Is
huge.
that your biggest achievement to date?
I think so. It was huge.
Do you have like honorary Galapagos citizenship?
I am a permanent resident.
Are you actually? So you could go back there any time?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Now that's, obviously you put in the graft, but that is a perk.
Put in the graft.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's very special. And there's very few of those, obviously. And it was during a certain time. There's only a certain time where they gave that permanent resident status to people who were there and working there at that time. But it's a huge honour to have that.
So let's talk about back to the UK. So you came back to the UK straight up from Galapagos, was it?
So after Galapagos, I did
it's
international
really,
work.
You have to keep up with, you've been everywhere, you're darting around the globe.
So after Galapagos, I'd done sort of, what was that? Sort of long period. So in Zanzibar, that was 8 years. So I haven't done anything like was zip between a couple of years. I've always felt you get to know the place, the language. Then you become effective, so you stay if you can be effective and help. So Zanzibar was 7 years, 8 years. Galapagos was 6-7 years, and after that I did do some international work. So that was where Turkey, Cuba,
and this was is this intergovernmental international organisations?
Yeah. So and we even looked a little bit about the South Pacific and things like that, New Zealand, South Pacific, and then came back to South America, came back within a year to Ecuador. And that's when I worked with an NGO, which was a South American NGO, dedicated to mediation and facilitation and conflict management around social and environmental and development. And that's where I decided this is what I can work on in issues around climate, environment and development, where big decisions are made.
And did you work mainly on a local and regional level, or were you working as well? Were you starting to work on an international level, intergovernmental level?
I became the director of that NGO. And
right. What was the NGO's name?
It's called Fundación Futuro Latinoamericano, which means a foundation for the future of Latin America, because it was a regional NGO. So it was working in 8 countries within South America. And it was a bit crazy. Here again is a girl from Hull, an English girl, becoming director of a Latin American NGO. So again, that's pretty huge. That was amazing. And they'd been all Latin American directors then and since. That's when we started working with the international project, and that was when the UK had its biggest climate policy programme. And I, as director, and my NGO worked on climate policy with developing countries in Caribbean, Central America and South America for DFID and DEC, which were the UK government's aims.
So as director, you were starting at that point to work with other governments on national level, international level kind of negotiations and mediations.
And that's when I started going to the climate summits, with those governments, because we were supporting them in terms of that mediation. How do you get the agreements that you then take into the negotiations?
Let's talk about coming back to the UK and deciding, do you know what I need to do? I need to get involved in UK politics. So you first started out in South Cambridgeshire District Council, am I right, as a councillor? Why did you decide to get into UK, to come back down to a council level after having been the director of working on an international level in mediating climate discussions?
So first, why am I interested in local, which I hadn't really realised that I'd go into local politics when we came back to England. But a lot of the work I'd been doing. So another moment in the climate talks happened in 2015 in Peru, in Lima. And it's when the national governments had got stymied and they were saying, we can't do more, we can't be more ambitious, we can't. And local governments all got together and said, this is what we're doing. And businesses said, this is what we're doing. And at that moment, when you added it up, it was greater than what national government said they could do. So I was doing a lot of work with networks of local government, and it was just brilliant. And that's when I started saying, well, how do you get involved in that? Do you go in as an advisor? And people say, well, why don't you stand?
When did the Lib Dems become the avenue for you?
It was when I was making kind of those decisions, because I'd come back and I joined the Green Party.
So this was one of the big questions I was going to get to, which you've meandered around. But why aren't you a Green MP?
I joined the Green Party when I get back, and because when I got to the UK was 2012, and I was looking around.
What a year! Yeah. Great year, 2012.
Fantastic year. I was looking around. I was looking at what the different parties were offering, what they were proposing, and I loved the manifesto for youth that the Green Party had come up with, and I thought this is fantastic. This is projecting the hope, for a future. And I joined the Green Party locally. And there was starting to be conversations about whether or not, I would stand in the Green Party. But I also saw that the Green Party is still a very broad church, and it was still working out, with its members, how you get to agreements on what you're standing for. And so I looked across at Germany saying, well, how's the Green Party, got to power in Germany? So I studied that as well, looked a little bit at that. Meanwhile, there were a lot was going on with the Lib Dems locally, and they'd sort of got to power. And I looked at the Lib Dem manifesto, and I thought, well, actually, not only, and this comes back to my background from working internationally, the Lib Dem manifesto wasn't just about how you are ambitious on the environmental things. It's how you use markets and the economy. It was about governing. It was costed. It was saying you can't get there as fast as some others are saying. You can't sort of get environmentally to some of the targets because you have to look after people's livelihoods, their jobs. You have to transition. That was the stuff. And I thought, actually, this is a party that knows how to govern, but is also looking at things in far more holistic. For me, it made a lot more sense to what I've been working with, which is how do you integrate economic development, people's jobs and livelihoods with the environmental ambitions you have.
So you were inspired by what you saw with the Lib Dems. Did you also become disenfranchised with what the discussions were in the Green Party about this?
I think when I was part of the Green Party, there wasn't necessarily the same structure that was in Lib Dems. I went to a Lib Dem conference, the policy motions, and I think I just found that I was just more drawn to what was happening there. And there were elections coming up, and the Lib Dems, did a very good pitch to me.
Given your natural instincts was to go to join the Green Party to start with, could you ever see yourself drifting back?
No, I mean, I work with Green Party, and that's fantastic. But within the Lib Dems, what I've found, far more than I ever thought I would, what I found within myself really is that this is the place where you're looking at so clearly it's about communities and localism. That's what really, really defines the Liberal Democrats, what everybody's right is within that. So it's not just about green issues. That has to come from where you empower a community, how a community has its voice, how it mediates differences, and how you then make sure that has a voice in all levels of power. Now, that's something that the Lib Dems, it's just their DNA. Link that then is one of the parties that is the most internationalist. So I'm an MP for South Cambridgeshire. And South Cambridgeshire is, as I said, one of the fastest growing places in the country. So for me, it's about how do you sustain what has been a kind of semi-rural area with this kind of growth being that Europe's capital in a way which empowers local people's voices, make sure it's highest environmental standards. We've got a water crisis. This is stuff that I think I can bring with that way of the mediating, ensuring local people's voice is heard, but making sure that we bring together the environment and development. So that is why I stood as an MP. Then on top of that, I think there's two things, as you'll have heard a bit from my history. Yes, on the green agenda and pushing that through Liberal Democrats, but also because we are now that large third party, it's working with Labour to say we support Labour in terms of what they're doing with their ambition, but making sure it's going to be urging them. I think there'll be quite a few areas we're going to say we're urging them to do more. and working with them to find the solutions and present solutions to say, this is how we can do more. But the way we do the green stuff is in terms of our European and international outlook as well, because we can't solve these problems just here in this country. So to me, it's both that green and the internationalist side too.
Let's move on now to actually becoming an MP. Actually, I should first. You help out a ladies' football team now. Am I right in thinking? So, what position did you play when you played football yourself back in the day?
So I was between usually centre half. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a bit of a run around. And
then, that's a proper work engine of a position. You're up and down the pitch.
Yeah. And then I moved into hockey.
You still play hockey, or
no? I don't play hockey anymore. But
still
I played
play football at all?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Do you
yeah,
still centre? Still
wherever they'll have me now. But yeah.
It's wherever you can get put. Sometimes in goal, sometimes the fourth sub.
But what was amazing was, again, it's communities, isn't it? So arriving in South Cambridgeshire and in our village, seeing that girls' teams were playing in girls' leagues because parents were in that FA league. So parents were helping coach, parents were doing, the lines, and the referees were doing all of the refreshments and enabling that opportunity for girls, which was my daughter included. So, from the age of sort of 11, 12, to be able to play in proper leagues with teams and fun. That's why I got involved in that, because all the other parents were as well. And to me, that was just.
Do you help out, or are you like the manager?
No, so this was before, so I'm not anymore.
Okay.
It was when my daughter was playing for the football. So I was doing both coaching and helping out with some of the refereeing. Yeah.
How would you describe your coaching style?
If it's a coach, so in a coaching session.
Yeah.
So I'm very vocal and very energetic, I would think, and I'm very much an eye on every player. So the players know that I want the best from them rather than as the whole team. So people know I know them and what I want from them. During a game,
match day,
I'm very loud.
Does the ref get some heat, or are you?
No, the ref doesn't get heat. Okay. No, I don't believe in a pylon on refs. No, I think that's wrong.
But where it's just a vocal parent / coach /
Yeah. I'm far too loud.
Right, becoming an MP.
Yes.
A swing to the Liberal Democrats from the Conservatives. You've just realised you're a member of Parliament. Talk to me about the next, let's say, 12 hours.
After the declaration, within about half an hour, you're presented with the envelope. You've probably heard.
We've been told about this envelope, yeah.
So you get the envelope. So my overriding feeling is you are now an MP. That's when it hits you, because it says your train and ticket has been arranged. Your hotel is arranged. You will present at Monday, 9:00, and this is, Friday, Monday for the whole week for the induction. And my thought was, and it said, and dress, attire, business smart. My thought was, I've been wearing the same suit for the last couple of weeks campaigning.
Nice.
I don't have any clean. If I could be out there, that was my.
That was. What am I going to wear?
What am I going to wear that doesn't stink? So, and yeah, there's no time to do anything different.
So what did you do?
Well, so I
decided,
no, there was no possibility, because Saturday and Sunday I was out in the constituency. I had media things.
Did
I was
you sleep
shadowed.
in between at all?
No. So Monday morning we were here, and it was all a bit surreal, wasn't it? And just amazing to then be, in the chamber, in the House of Commons, was just amazing. And then have the training that we was 9 to 5 training. And but as soon as it was finished, I dashed out. So I was in a bit of a stinky suit, trying to keep a little bit apart.
Oh, so you went in the suit?
I went in the stinky suit. And then I dashed out after the training, running around going, where can I buy something?
Straight into an M&S or something. Just please, anything.
Anything. So easy for men again. So easy for you to get a suit. It's not easy for women to get a suit.
I love the idea of you just being very self-consciously aware of the suit you're wearing whilst becoming an MP. What did it feel like to walk into the House of Commons? Because if you're a visitor in the House of Commons, you can only go in at certain times when they're allowing people in, and you do not sit on the green benches. You're not allowed to sit, Yeah. But obviously you're an MP now.
Yeah.
You have every right to sit there on these infamous green benches. What was the feeling that you remember?
It really was quite surreal for a little bit, to make it feel very real, and rather than, as I was talking with somebody who said, we just feel that somebody's going to say, right, back on the bus.
Yeah. This was fun, wasn't it?
This was fun.
Go
wasn't
on,
this fun? No, get back on the bus now. So it did take a day or two to then sink in, and there's all the imposter syndrome.
Do you think you're over that now?
I think there's a lot to learn. So for me, I want to learn it. I want to learn it fast. I want to be as effective as I can very fast. So all during that learning, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, how on earth can I be doing, the written questions and the oral questions, and how can I, until I know how I can really do it. But I'll still be doing it.
I just wanted to bring up something you said in your maiden speech, which was paying tribute to Heidi Allen, a member of Parliament. And you highlighted that she stood down from politics as a result of abuse that she faced, and you made a point of saying many MPs, mainly women, face. What was really driving you to want to do that then, and that to be one of the first things that you contribute to the Commons?
There was a lot of people who'd lost trust in politics, and that sense of, you're all the same, or a normalization of the fact that because you feel strongly about something, then you can attack somebody who's got a different opinion or may represent you, in a different way. And I think we saw it, extremely, and I think Heidi Allen suffered particularly at that time because of what was happening around the divisiveness of Brexit and a normalization of language which is aggressive. I just think we need to make it very explicit that the way we talk to each other matters, and that the way we address each other matters. And that matters as much for an MP, to people in their constituency or otherwise, to the media, and beyond. And I think we do need a reset.
What does a reset look like? Reset?
Yeah. Well, it means that, I think, again, with the media, when we're talking about the media, so when we're looking at what sells a programme, what sells a paper, I think there should be really the guidelines are there, and I think we've just got to come back to those guidelines.
So you see the media as quite a key part in framing.
Yeah. And so,
what does that look like for you though? Is that a greater regulation, or is that a top-down change that needs to happen, or is it, how do you see that reset, that change happening within the media?
So I think if they were talking about within the political environment, then MPs have just got to be much more available and accessible, and that we have conversations which are not only not answering the questions, so that we've actually got richer discussion and debate happening. And so that becomes hopefully, far more of an interesting interview or whatever. You're not trying to find something which just sort of the sensational side of that. I think the other side is, I think we need to be looking at the conduct of the media. I think we need to be looking at depoliticizing. I think the BBC, I think we also need to be looking at what's happening in terms of more independence, from political interference, I think. And there are many different platforms now, and I feel passionately that we can do much, much more with other media organisations, which are the social tech giants, those other platforms which are beyond the mainstream media. We absolutely need regulation of those, where we can have safe spaces within those. We have free speech, but it has to be safe.
All right. Ready for a quick fire round? Early riser or night owl?
Early riser.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Milky or no milk?
No, Builders.
No sugar? Builders tea. Favourite film?
Ooh, The English Patient.
Dogs or cats or pet fish or no pets? Dogs. Got any dogs?
Yeah.
How many dogs?
One dog, cockapoodle.
A cockapoodle.
Called Luna.
Called Luna. Ever been to the Commons with you yet?
No. But Jenny, as you know, Jenny is our...
We know about Jenny. We're trying to get Jenny down here, but yeah, we haven't quite got there yet, but hopefully one day. Embarrassing crush when you were a teenager?
Ooh. Embarrassing crush, I'd say it was the squash teacher.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. The MP you'd most like to be marooned on a desert island with?
Oh, that's interesting. I would go Josh Babarindi.
Favourite football team?
Oh, so favourite football team is Liverpool.
Liverpool?
That's from very young, so I've gone to, yeah.
Favourite karaoke song?
Well, that's got to be, Queen, Mamma Mia.
Finally, you're a new MP.
Yeah.
What is the one thing you would like to have achieved, and one thing you can look back on and say, I made that change, or I was a key part of implementing that change, and I'm so proud and glad that I did that one thing? What would it be for you?
It would be about South Cambridgeshire. We've managed to solve the water supply problems and the sewage problems. And I do think being an MP, you can actually have some influence over that. And that would mean you have to influence what's happening nationally with the water companies. You can't do it with the regulator we've got at the moment, which is Ofwat. So I would be immediately wanting us to scrap Ofwat and be coming with a regulator, which comes back again to almost what we've been talking about, which is water companies need to be like public interest companies where you use the market, but they have to, as shareholders, they have to look not just at profit, they have to look at their environmental and social targets too.
Pippa Heylings, thank you very much.